It was 2 in the morning, and my kitchen table looked more like a crime scene than a place to eat. Credit reports, foreclosure notices, and bank statements were spread across the surface like scattered pieces of a life I no longer recognized. My hands shook as I tried to make sense of how every detail of my financial identity had been twisted into something unrecognizable. What would you do if someone you trusted turned your own name into a weapon? The clock ticked louder than usual, marking every second that my world slipped further out of control. I was staring at a foreclosure notice for $1 million house in Beverly Hills that I had never bought, yet every page bore my signature. The paper felt heavy in my hands, like proof that my life had been stolen piece by piece while I was busy working late nights to build a future I thought was safe. I thought betrayal came in the form of strangers, but that night I learned it wears the face of family. My sister had turned my perfect credit into her playground, building a fantasy life that looked glamorous from the outside while I was left drowning in debts I never created. Sitting there in the silence of that kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of everything I had built, I realized this was no longer just about money. It was about survival, truth, and whether I had the strength to fight back. I was 22 when I landed my first real job and walked away with a signing bonus of $15,000. For me, it was more than money. It was proof that years of late nights in the library and endless internships had finally paid off. I had a plan to pay down my student loans, maybe even put a small cushion into savings. For the first time, the future felt like it belonged to me. That feeling lasted less than a week. My sister was planning her wedding, and my parents pulled me aside with the kind of smile that pretends it is a request, but feels more like a command. They said family supports family, and insisted that I give her the entire bonus to make her special day perfect. I tried to explain that this was the start of my independence, that I needed this chance to breathe after years of scraping by. Their response cut deep. They told me I was being selfish, that her happiness was more important than my own plans. When the money vanished into a honeymoon fund instead of a loan, I understood something that never left me. My success was never going to be mine alone. Every achievement I earned would be treated like community property, open for the taking, and if I dared protest, I would be the villain. That was the first crack in the foundation, and I felt it split beneath my feet. When I was 26, I bought my first condo. It cost $320,000 and represented years of discipline, overtime, and sacrifice. Owning that place was supposed to be a milestone, a symbol that my hard work had finally built something solid. I never imagined that the keys I handed my sister for emergencies would unlock another round of betrayal. Within a few months, I began noticing things that did not make sense. Furniture scuffed, stains on the carpet, and mail addressed to strangers. I returned from a business trip to find the coffee table broken and wine stains bleeding into the floor. It did not take long to discover the truth. My sister had been listing my condo on Airbnb, inviting strangers into my home without my permission, and pocketing the profit. The damages added up to $5,000, but the deeper wound was knowing she had turned my sanctuary into a marketplace. I confronted her, and instead of remorse, I got a shrug and a lecture about how I was never home anyway. She said I should be grateful that she was helping me make money. When I turned to my parents for support, they dismissed me as controlling and uptight. They called her resourceful. That word felt like a knife. In their eye, I was not the victim, but the problem, and the more I resisted, the more they made me feel like an outsider. Betrayal had become routine, and tolerance only gave her license to push further. The day I learned my company was no longer mine felt like losing my own name. I had spent 7 years building a consulting firm that generated more than $600,000 a year. It was not just revenue, It was proof of every late night, every client won through persistence, and every sacrifice I made when no one else believed in me. With a forged signature and a stack of fraudulent documents, my sister transferred the entire business into her own name. The shock cut deeper than anything that came before. My clients were congratulating her on her sudden success, while I was left fighting to prove I even existed in the paperwork. I expected my family to see through the lie, but instead they applauded her as if she had finally grown into a leader. They told me to stop being jealous and bitter, that I should celebrate her achievements rather than tear them down. Hearing those words from my own parents was worse than the theft itself. I realized then that the betrayal was no longer personal. It was public, professional, and permanent in their eyes. My life's work had been erased, and the person who stole it was being praised as the daughter they had always wanted. What my sister believed she had stolen was a thriving business worth hundreds of thousands a year. What she actually took was a time bomb I had been carefully managing for 2 years. Hidden inside the company were $2 million in international tax obligations. A tax liability is not like regular debt. It is the government's claim on money you owe for past income or contracts, and it grows heavier with every month of interest and penalties. It is not optional, and it cannot be ignored. I had structured the business to protect myself, documenting everything with the guidance of a federal mentor. Every contract, every dollar earned across borders, carried rules and deadlines only a trained accountant could handle. To me, the company was a delicate balancing act, like holding fire in my hands without being burned. She saw it as a golden chest of treasure and never noticed the lock was made of iron. When she transferred the firm into her name, she did not just claim the income, she also claimed full responsibility for the debt attached to it. It was the ultimate reversal. The empire she thought she had seized was nothing more than a trap waiting to close. In her hands, the gold turned to lead, heavy and merciless. For the first time, justice was not something I had to chase. It was already built into the numbers, waiting for her arrogance to step directly into it. The night of her celebration looked like something staged for a magazine cover. The country club ballroom glittered with $50,000 in flowers, crystal centerpieces, and golden arches spelling out her initials. Waiters carried trays of champagne, while a string quartet played in the corner, every note meant to reinforce the illusion of class and success. She walked in, draped in a $10,000 gown, sequins catching every light, her smile rehearsed for the cameras she had hired to follow her around. Outside, her new $80,000 BMW gleamed in the valet line like a trophy she had never earned. Family and neighbors gasped with admiration as if they had witnessed a miracle. They whispered about how she must have worked hard to achieve this level of wealth and elegance. My parents beamed with pride, soaking up borrowed prestige as though her glitter was theirs to share. People congratulated her on her business genius, pointing to the decorations as evidence of her rise. Not one of them asked how she had vaulted from constant debt to a luxury empire in less than a year. What they were really admiring was my stolen name stitched into contracts and my stolen credit fueling every glass of champagne. They saw wealth and confused it with virtue. They saw luxury and mistook it for legitimacy. Standing in the shadows of that ballroom, I could only watch as the lie played out like a play. The applause was loud, the praise was endless, and yet underneath it all, the foundation was hollow. Every dollar in that room was borrowed against my identity, and the debt she carried was waiting just beyond the spotlight. The celebration was nothing more than a mask, and the truth was almost ready to rip it away. The music stopped the moment the investigators walked through the doors. The string quartet fell silent. The chatter dropped to a whisper. and every head in the ballroom turned toward the woman holding a badge that carried the weight of 30 years in federal law enforcement. She announced herself from the center of the room, her voice sharp and unwavering, and within seconds the celebration turned into a courtroom. On the screen behind her, documents flashed that told the real story: 17 federal charges, $3.2 million in damages, every asset in the room, from the champagne tower to the car parked outside, is tied to stolen identity and fraud. The applause that had filled the night vanished into stunned silence. Guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering the truth they had ignored for months. Old family friends stared at me with wide eyes, realizing the business they thought she had built was mine all along. My parents' proud smiles drained into pale disbelief, but still they said nothing. She, the star of the evening, tried to laugh it off, her voice cracking as she claimed misunderstanding. The panic in her eyes betrayed her before her words even left her mouth. I did not move. I did not raise my voice. I let the weight of silence say more than anger ever could. As agents read each charge and placed her under arrest, I finally spoke the words that had waited for years. You wanted my life so badly that you took my debts too. Her empire crumbled in that instant, not with a bang, but with the cold certainty of justice. The crowd no longer saw a leader. They saw the truth, and the truth was merciless. The arrest was only the beginning. Federal prosecutors charged my sister with identity theft, bank fraud, and tax evasion. The potential sentence was 30 to 40 years in prison, and the debt she inherited was more than $2 million in unpaid tax obligations. Overnight, the glamorous life she had flaunted dissolved into orange jumpsuits and court hearings. Every luxury she had paraded became evidence, seized and cataloged as stolen property. The same people who once praised her success now whispered about her downfall with pity and disgust. The consequences spread beyond her cell. My parents, who had chosen her lies over my truth, saw their own reputations collapse. The $25,000 European vacation she promised them was canceled when their passports were flagged during the investigation. Neighbors who had once admired their proud stories turned away, unwilling to be associated with a family caught up in federal crimes. For the first time, they had to face the reality of what enabling her had cost, not just in money but in honor. For me, life opened in a direction I never expected. Investigators and federal agencies recognized my skills as a forensic accountant, and consulting offers poured in. I signed contracts worth $250,000 a year, work that allowed me to turn years of pain into a platform for protection. With those resources, I created the Rose Torres Foundation, named for my grandmother, whose warnings I finally understood. The foundation helps victims of family financial abuse, giving them the tools and legal support I once had to fight for alone. When I visit the memorial garden built in her honor, I stand among sunflowers planted in rows. They rise tall and bright, always turning toward the light, no matter how heavy the storms. That garden is a reminder that betrayal may wound us, but resilience allows us to grow again. My story did not end with loss. It transformed into purpose, rooted in truth, and reaching upward toward something stronger than what was ever taken from me. Truth has a way of standing steady, no matter how many lies are built around it. Numbers never bend to emotion or excuse, and that is why I learned to trust them when people failed me. In the end, the balance sheet revealed what words tried to hide. Wealth built on theft collapsed, but dignity built on truth remained unshaken. If you have ever faced betrayal from family, a colleague, or even a friend, know that what they take from you is never the essence of who you are. They may seize money, position, or reputation for a time, but they cannot steal your integrity. That belongs to you alone, and it is what will carry you forward when the noise dies down. This story is not just about financial fraud. It is about how standing firm in evidence, patience, and self-respect can outlast arrogance and manipulation. Dignity cannot be bought or borrowed. It is proven in how you rise after being torn down. If this reminded you of your own struggle, share it with someone who needs to hear that protection comes from truth, not from approval. And I want to hear from you. Leave a comment with the most important financial or moral lesson you have ever learned. Your story might be the strength someone else needs tonight.